Good morning. You're listening to Retake Our Democracy, a 30-minute weekly radio show that airs at 8:30 a.m. each Saturday morning on KSFR 101.1 FM, your Santa Fe public radio station. And I'm Paul Gibson, the host of Retake Our Democracy. And today I'm going to be speaking with Neri Holguin, who is the election campaign consultant and campaign manager extraordinaire. Unbelievable batting average. At one point, I think you'd never lost a race.
Yeah.
We'll get to Natty in just a moment, but first, a few brief announcements. Last week, we spoke with Chile Yazzie, an indigenous activist who has long been part of the effort to close San Juan Generating Station and involved in other activist efforts wherever climate justice and indigenous justice intersect. Joining him was my old pal, Marielle Nanasi, who had, in her role as director and chief litigant for New Energy Economy, has been trying to hold energy and gas and oil industries accountable. We spoke about the San Juan Generating Station and PNM's plan to leave a toxic mess behind for others to clean up. I want to remind you that if you're listening to this show while driving around town and miss any of today's show, you can go to retakeourdemocracy.org and click on Retake on the radio. It's a button on the right-hand side of the homepage. And all of our previous shows, including this one, will be there. And they're listed in chronological order, so you can binge watch Retake on the radio. You can't often watch radio, but Retake you can. I also want to announce the next in our series of Zoominars on the bills that we will be supporting in the 2023 legislative session. We've done Zoominars on gun violence prevention and modernizing the legislature by paying legislators and their staff and lengthening the sessions. Next in the series will be a Zoominar on public banking, and we have a tremendous panel that will be offering their insights as to how a public bank could accelerate diversifying the New Mexico economy and boost economic vitality in rural and tribal communities. That Zoominar will be Wednesday, October 26th from 6 to 7:30. You can sign up by going to retakeourdemocracy.org, clicking on the actions and events in the banner on the homepage, and you'll land on a page where right at the top will be information about that Zoominar. Before we get started, I also want to acknowledge that we are conducting this show on stolen Tewa land, and I want to thank our Tewa neighbors for being such good stewards of the land. We could learn much from their custodial caring for our land and water and air. Okay, let's meet our guest, Neri Holguin. Welcome to the show, Neri. It's been a couple of years, I think, since you made your last appearance.
Yeah, at least that. I like to be very much a behind the scenes person. And so I don't, yeah, if a couple years or if this is actually my inaugural first time, could be true too, but I'll have to go to your homepage and see.
Okay. Well, on our homepage, we won't have recordings that were done prior to Zoom. There you have to go to ksfr.org and go to the podcast.
Okay,
But
great.
I'll check it out and let you know.
Mhm.
I like to let our guests introduce themselves. So how about you telling us how you became an election campaign manager and what the job entails?
Yeah. So I started off at UNM and got involved through student organizing. So I was a student organizer at UNM with an organization back in the 90s. We were called the Progressive Student Alliance. And so we were involved in all sorts of issues regarding tuition increases and divestment and all sorts of things. But that's where I got my start. And then did community organizing. And then through that, the long story short was that we were fighting the road through the Petroglyph National Monument in Albuquerque. It was a big fight back in the 90s. It's a national monument. They wanted to put commuter road through it. It was one of the, all kinds of exceptions were being made. Anyway, we were great organizers, and we would organize, hundreds of people to show up to community meetings, and we would lose. And it became apparent to us that what we needed to do was change those decision makers. And so that was my route to politics, was really through student and community organizing.
Similar. I mean, that's how Retake started taking interest in the legislature and the elections, because we just were getting killed. And we figured we needed to get different people in there making those votes. So you have an intimate and a kind of unique perspective on what makes winning campaigns. When a candidate comes to you to secure your services, what are you looking for in a candidate before you sign on?
Yeah, always it's the candidate herself, himself. Are they would they make a good elected person? What are they about? What are their values? It's very much like what's a person's values. And oftentimes we have a candidate will come to me, super, you know, hits all the sort of things that would make, somebody, a wonderful elected person, but they're in Farmington or they're in a place where it is, it's going to be impossible for a Democrat to win. So, there's got to be some, I'm always up for a hard game. I mean, swing seats are sort of like, are the races I like to run because, that's what we need in order to win and be in the legislature. But there's some seats that are just clearly on the Dem side or on the R side, and those races are primary races. And
Right.
it's so oftentimes, I mean, it's I'll talk, I talk pretty straight to candidates, and I will say, you know what, like, you're just an incredibly qualified person and you've got a great story and you should be in office, but you're going to have to think about, can you move? Can you move to where it's winnable?
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
Well, okay. Well, we're going to be talking about maybe one of those candidates a little bit later in the show. Can you share with us the key elements that contribute to election campaign success?
Yeah. A candidate that is hardworking, a candidate, I love and often take first time candidates because you get these folks that are, they're experts in whatever field they come. So, whether it's an educator, very clear around education issues, or, whether it's, a business person or whatever it is, they come with their, deep knowledge around, a particular issue. And it's like, well, we need you to understand healthcare issues. We need you to be able to talk about other sorts of climate, environment, other sorts of issues. So let's, your values are right, but um, let's get you up to speed on these other things that are going to matter in the election. So, it's a candidate that's willing to work hard, learn, and in terms of a campaign success, having a good plan for how you're going to raise money, you need to be able to um, uh, communicate with voters. So we're going to have to put together a campaign plan and a campaign team in order to support that great candidate.
Okay. So, I was going to ask you a follow-up on that. It slipped through my brain. So fundraising is a big part of this as well. And what is it that I know what the question was? What does it cost now for a typical House and Senate race in New Mexico?
Yeah, um, in the primary, which is a lot of the races, that I worked on, probably, we were doing those races for House at about 100,000. I think just have a strong competitive campaign. And then now in the general election, we're looking at a couple 100,000.
Wow.
So, you know, comparative, like when I hear other folks talk about, California or some of these other places, fairly inexpensive, but also, those are such big numbers. Like I always tell, candidates when they get started and somebody, and that's a very fair question people ask, like, how much is this going to cost? And it's like, listen, you're fundraising not for yourself. $100,000 to you or me means something very specific if it's money, if it's our money. But if we have to raise it, we've got a plan for how we're going to do that. And it's other people's real money, but it's also, you got to think about it not as you know, uh, you're asking for yourself. You can't pay your mortgage or any of those sorts of things that make it hard, I think, for a lot of working class or first time candidates is like, you're asking people for money. It's a hard thing to do.
Yeah,
But you also learn, it's a skill, and you also learn, how to talk about who you are, why you're running, and why you need the help.
yeah, yeah. For our listeners, what should someone consider when they're thinking about who to make contributions to? You get no end of emails asking for funds, but should the criteria be for listeners to decide I'm going to put $100 on this guy or this woman?
Yeah, I mean, I think that talking to folks about, what are the races that are, really critical right now? What are the races where people, need support? A lot of emails and things that I see, because people also, ask me for contributions, and, you know, um, what is it that they're saying? Like there's like kind of cookie cutter stuff, but then you're starting, like if you look at stuff, you can sort of see that there are some differences in terms of campaigns. But I think also asking around, like, who are the candidates that need help? What's that really need sort of help, and getting
We're,
sort of advice on that.
we're going to get into some specifics in that in the second half of the interview, but why is the New Mexico election so important this year?
Boy, for all the reasons that, we're hearing nationally, and even, we know it matters here in New Mexico, is, abortion is on the line. That is what we are voting to protect here in New Mexico. And as New Mexico becomes even more critical because the surrounding states don't have, protections for abortion access, New Mexico matters to us and to other states in the country. So we need to be able to hold on to the protections that we have. And then also, in the House, we need to have a legislature, that is, going to hold the line. So it's,
Are you talking
supporting.
about abortion there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And on other issues as well too. I mean, we we have some really tough elections that are coming up here in terms of the advantage that Democrats have in the legislature.
Okay. So I need to take a quick break here and remind our listeners that they're listening to KSFR 101.1 FM, your Santa Fe public radio station. And it's at times like these where there's so much misinformation in the social media and the mainstream media. That's when KSFR is so important because they deliver straight news, great programming, interview shows like this, Democracy Now!, Economic Update with Richard Wolff right before this show. I encourage you to listen to that before you tune into this. So there's great programming, but we got to pay for the engineers and the program manager there and a good studio. So if you can, after you finish listening to this program, go to ksfr.org, click on the donate button and toss them 10, 20, 50 bucks and view it as a year's worth of dues for great program, ticket for admission for some great programming. So do it, please. And thank you on behalf of KSFR. Initial polling has Democrats in pretty strong leads in all the statewide races. Are there any New Mexico races about which you have concerns?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that, we've been seeing the Attorney General's race. So, Jeremy Gay, the Republican from Gallup, I believe, we saw, I think, a poll this week that was, showing that lead was tightening up there with him against Raul Torres. So I'm a little bit I have not seen any sort of it, I'm working on legislative races and county races in Bernalillo County here. So I've not seen any of the polling outside of what everybody else has seen. But I do worry. I mean, we are seeing things tighten up in the races I'm involved in. So I'm not surprised to see races where you see, the Republican attorney generals that are hitting Raul. The Republican opponent, Jeremy Gay's been up on television. So that plays a role. And, um, so I'm a little bit worried about that one, just because it's been on TV.
Oh, that makes me nervous because he's so phenomenal. We've had him on the radio show and we did a fundraiser for him, and really, really like that guy.
Yeah.
What about the congressional races? I've seen almost no ads for Teresa's opponent until last night, and
Oh,
Teresa's ads seem great, and she seems I believe I heard she was well ahead in the polls. What are you hearing about that race?
um, I am, just like you, Paul, I'm watching TV and seeing what I'm seeing, which are great ads. But I think out of the congressional races, all three of them, she is the most up, so that's good. Um, I think Melanie's race, I think is tightening up, and I think a lot of it has to do with not so much their opponents, but um, these are swing races. So in order to make District 2 more competitive. So it's a tough election year, and I think you know, I think uh I think I think she should be fine, but certainly, we'll have to see kind of what her opponent has. Um
What about Melanie and Gabe?
Yeah, so exactly that. So I think Melanie's race is a little bit tighter than folks I think anticipated. And then in Gabe's race, I know they've got a tremendous, on the field campaign, which is really what won there for Soch Torres Small a number of years ago. So I'm hopeful that he's able to do it.
Me too. Um, I've known you most as the campaign manager in state house races. Are there any house races where you have concerns about holding a seat? And which races are you directly involved with this year?
Yeah. So, there's in the state house, there's 70 seats right now. 45 are held by Democrats, 25 Republican. We have 12, about half a dozen that are toss-ups and or swing seats. What we say, their Democratic performance is between 48% and 52. So meaning that all things being equal, your, generic Democrat versus your generic Republican has a slight advantage, or in some of these races, a disadvantage. So it is, we are down ballot races. So, a lot of what happens at the top, um, uh, in terms of affecting turnout has an impact on us down locally. So, there's a number of races that I am, house races that I am concerned about in terms of holding on for sure.
And what are the races you're managing?
Yeah, so I am managing the selection cycle. So 5 campaigns. So 3 state house races. So in Bernalillo County, the competitive seats are on the west side and east side. That's where it's the swingiest. So I have Joy Garrett on the west side, educator who I've worked with for a number of years, one of my most favorite people. She really just lives up to her name. And then on the east side, I'm working with again with Meredith Dixon. So that was a seat that retake. Every single person that walked and knocked doors, and I know you all did for Abbas Akil in 2018, where he won by 112 votes. That's a swing seat, and then I'm working with Tara Jaramillo, who is in Socorro. And that district, that's the Rebecca Dow seat. So that's a pickup. And she's just an incredible candidate. She is the largest private healthcare provider in the area. She employs about 500 people. And she is a speech pathologist. Richard Ellenberg just did a great event for her last week, and a number of folks came, and she was super grateful to the support that and the encouragement and the welcoming she got in Santa Fe for and then in Bernalillo County. So I have a couple interesting races. I know we're talking, most of the listeners are up there in Santa Fe, but I'm working with, his name is John Allen, and he's a sheriff candidate, and he is, has strong democratic values. I ran 2 years ago the mayor's race, and we ran against Sheriff Manny Gonzalez, and I can tell you, it is time for a change. We need a new sheriff, and he is great on issues on choice, on gun safety, and having a champion like that from the biggest county in the state as a sheriff is just going to be a game changer. So John Allen, he'd be the first African American elected sheriff in the state. So that's exciting. And then I have Eric Olivas, who's been on your show. He's running for county commission. So, in Albuquerque, what we're dealing with is we've got a, strong Democratic mayor and Tim Keller, and we've got a city council that is Democrat in name only, and we can only play defense there. And at the county, 2 seats are up. I'm working with both of those county commission candidates. One is in a
with Barbara Baca as well.
Yeah, so Barbara Baca did still working with her, and she's in a Democratic district, and Eric Olivas is in another swing seat on the east side of the county. But boy, he's looking really strong. He's a phenomenal first-time candidate. I mean, it just gives me so much hope that there are, lots of little diamonds in the rough out there that just need to, think about, getting into office, because I think he's going to be a real game changer on the county commission.
We just wrote a big blog about those 2 races, because we are encouraging people, if you're worried about getting the most bang for your buck, you can go down and canvass, or you can call for either Barbara or Eric, and you're also helping up ballot races in the House. And he mentioned that he is, when I talked to him, he mentioned that every week he's campaigning with a different House candidate that shares the boundaries he has.
Yeah, there's 8 House districts in the county, in his county seat, and we are partnering up with those House races. And so it's been great, because we're doubling the effort in terms of volunteers. So so it's with Pamela Herndon, Natalie Figueroa, Meredith. Those all have competitive races out in his district.
Okay, so we did a fundraiser for Augie Montoya from District 22, despite being warned by House leadership that he didn't have a very good chance. The DPI in that district is 43. We feel Augie is such a good candidate. I sort of feel the same way about him as I do about Eric. It's like he's got a great future. We just got to get him in office.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about that race?
Like that race, that district also is in part of the East Mountains, which overlaps with Eric Olivas's county commission seat. And there is no question he is working hard. And I think a lot of times, we're investing in him, and him, and then there's, Danny Bernal, who is in Valencia County, running in these tough rural districts. I think that it's thinking about it in terms of an investment. So, he is running against one of the worst, Steffi Lord, and QAnon, just an obstructionist, just really, an unpleasant representative. I mean, I'm grateful that he has her, busy working, and she's having to protect home base. So you know, Augie's great. I think a lot of folks are really just excited about him, and also Danny Bernal, who is young, a real promising young guy in Valencia County.
Okay. So we've been talking a little bit about candidates in rural areas that have a really tough time. So this question is sort of along those lines. And we have about 2 minutes left in the show.
Okay.
There is a kind of urban-rural divide in New Mexico. Is there any progressive candidate messaging that can resonate in rural New Mexico? And if so, what is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think around sort of working family issues, sort of the bread and butter stuff that we talk about, healthcare, education. I'm running with a candidate right now that they're Tara Jaramillo, that they're, the Republican Party is beating her up on, is her connection to environmental extremists like Conservation Voters New Mexico and the Rio Grande chapter of the Sierra Club. And,
I
she's a
miss
woman.
their being radical.
She's she has a farm, she has a ranch, and it's like, really, like, it's just a total misfire. And I think that, the key to some of these rural places, we have to have like at least some, ability to win in some of these races. But getting people that are so rooted and connected to that community. Like, so the Republican Party from Albuquerque is hammering her, as being a sort of out of touch left wing extremist. It's like, people know this woman. She's been around her whole life. Like, that is not her, So I think it's really keen, I mean, that's the situation with Augie. That's the situation with Danny Bernal. Is, can we in different years also, is their race more competitive?
So can you tell people if they're interested in getting involved in any of your races, how should they reach you?
Yeah, so which is kind of unhelpful. So I would say the easiest way is to go to my website. I mean, it's an old website, but it works. And it's my first name and last name .com. And I have a link of candidates and their websites. And so you can go to look at the candidates that I'm working with this election cycle: Eric, John Allen, Joy Garrett, Meredith Dixon, Tara Jaramillo, and that's the easiest way to connect with the campaigns.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to close the show, but we're going to continue the conversation for YouTube. And so I want to thank our listeners for being with us and encourage you to stay safe and healthy. And most of all, stay engaged and involved. It's the only way we fix this mess. We'll be back next week with another show. Thank you very much. Yeah, we just have to be quiet for a second there so that they know where the end of the show was. All right, we're back. We were talking about the urban-rural divide, and you were talking about bread and butter issues. And that's certainly been the emphasis on Gabe's and Augie's campaigns, which I'm pretty familiar with both of those candidates and their campaigns. But it doesn't seem to matter. The Republicans come after them with the ads on Augie are horrible. I mean, not on Augie, on Gabe, as if he's some left-wing extremist. I'm looking forward to the day when someone's accused of that and they go, damn right I am. And that resonates in rural New Mexico. I think we're a decade away, maybe. I realize that New Mexico is your domain of operations, but what do you see in the midterms? Do the Democrats hold the Senate and the House? What's coming down the pike?
Yeah, I I'm a casual, but observer, like probably you're sort of everybody else that listens to your show. But I certainly am looking at the swing races and nervous about what we're hearing in terms of the races tightening up in Arizona and Pennsylvania, in terms of the Senate races and the House. I mean, we have our work to do here. So I'm always like, keep your nose, on what you can do and what you can affect locally. We have a real opportunity with Gabe and also making sure our governor gets reelected, importantly, and then these House races. They're it's like carpet bombing out there. The Republicans every day are sending out, mailers on crime, and it's just like crime all the time. So this is not new. This is sort of like, their old playbook of, immigrants are to be blamed for crime, and the border. I mean, it's an old playbook, and so we're just having to make sure that we're competitive and also talking about other issues as well too.
Right, right. So, for those New Mexicans who want to help Democrats in other parts of the country, are you familiar with Swing Left, Vote Forward, Working America, and I suspect there are some others. Do you have any recommendations as to which might be particularly effective?
Gosh, I um I'm most familiar with Working America. Is that not what
Marty and Carol.
Morning Carol yeah,
Yes.
are working with? And so I get their emails. So I hear most from them. But um yeah, I mean, I'd say for folks that are interested in getting involved, help us here locally, on the races here locally, if you can. And, jump in the car and spend, make it a trip, visit Old Town, but spend, a couple hours walking for one of these candidates. I mean, we're making calls right now, and we're also finding that, people aren't picking up like they used to in terms of on the phone. We're doing texting, but really, the face-to-face work. I mean, it's the shoe leather stuff that's, there's no secret, being divulged here, but that kind of conversations, those sorts of real connections with other humans, talking about issues and what's coming up this election is really the difference.
So are there better times to canvass? Because I went down and canvassed for Gabe a couple of weeks ago on a Saturday afternoon, and almost no one was home.
Yeah, I always find really, and campaigns are sort of different about it, um, is like the Sunday evenings, like the 4 to 7, or now that it's getting darker, because people are getting ready for the work week. And so they're home on the Sunday, late afternoons, early evenings.
Okay,
And
listeners, sign up for that Sunday afternoons to get down to Albuquerque and do some canvassing.
would be so grateful. Yeah.
Okay, well, I want to thank you for being with us today, Nettie.
Paul, it's a pleasure.
And
And thank you for all the work. I mean, I find, the newsletters you send out, just very informative, and really helpful. I often, if I've got to check something out, I go back to look through old stuff and see what you've sent. So thank you for the work you do.
okay, and thank you for the work that you do. Maybe we'll have something to celebrate on election eve.
I hope so. Yes.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Take care,
Okay,
Nettie.
great. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.